Brother Jeremiah Camara is joining us. Brother Jeremiah, welcome back to WOL Radio.
Hey, thanks, Brother Nelson. Appreciate it. Good to be here.
Well, it's Holy Week. This is how we celebrate Holy Week here on WOL. We have people like you and Dr. Walter Williams on. So it's your turn today because you've been doing a lot of research about the Black church because from your thesis or what you've been investigating is where the Black church is limiting or stunting or retarding, whatever words you want to use, black progress. So you've been doing this for quite a while. Have you come up with any definitive answer yet, or is the jury still out?
Well, I mean, we have empirical evidence. That's all we can point to. We're losing $250 million a week on average, and there's nothing to point to. There's nothing to show for it. We're still on the bottom of everything, but yet we're going to flood the churches tomorrow. So it's empirical evidence that we can look at. I was in the barbershop a few days ago, and I actually heard black men in their 40s, probably some in their 50s, talking about they were going to, that they were, looking to get some more clothes for Easter. I just couldn't believe it. It's just mind-boggling to think that you're still doing the same thing that you were doing when you were 5 and 6 years old. But I mean, there are reasons for that, But as far as the verdict and the church limiting Black progress, that's a subject that will go on and on because people will swear that it's not true because they're heavily invested in it. And, but it's really, it's a lot to it, Carl. We can go into a lot of it today.
All right. Well, first, let's tell us about your latest project, The Holy Hierarchy, The Religious Roots of Racism. What's that all about?
Well, I'm in 4 film festivals now, so I'm just waiting on a call or an email. And so I'm looking forward to that. But that film basically deals with colonial America and how it's an easy transition to, believe in from a belief in a human superiority to a godly superiority. In other words, the film deals with colonial America, how racism was codified into law, and how the beliefs in a biased supreme being led to beliefs led to beliefs in supreme human beings, and how these beliefs ultimately turned into precepts. And one of the most fundamental precepts was that God created whites to be superior to blacks. And so therefore they were by birthright, superior. And so this notion actually, infiltrated the law, was codified into law. Laws were passed claiming that God was on the side of the master. And this is basically the beginning of racism as we know it in the United States. And I tell people, you really have to understand Virginia. If you really want to know racism in this country, you got to take it back to Virginia because that's where all the precepts, all the notions, all the players were, Patrick Henry, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and so forth. And, 10 of the first 12 presidents are from Virginia, and they owned slaves. And so that mindset that was prevalent back then is still with us today.
You mentioned it was codified. So is it written down somewhere, or is it just understood?
Yeah, it was,
and that
it was written
understanding has
down.
been passed
Both.
on.
Yeah, both. What was not written down was a precept. So precepts are just general laws, general rules that tell people how to teach people how to think about one another. But there were laws. In 1667, the Virginia legislature wrote a law that God was on the side of the slave master. And so the notions that blacks were inferior was a precept. And it's just like, there's no, like if you break the law, in your car, you're going to get a penalty for it. You'll get a ticket, reprimanded or whatever. There's no penalty for breaking a precept. But what it does, it teaches people how to think and what to believe, And so this belief was prevalent and it's still prevalent. You cannot talk about racism without talking about white supremacy. You can't talk about white supremacy without talking about Christianity. They are tied. They are blended. They're as one. It is impossible to see me as your equal when there are images that exist all around this country of Caucasian Jesuses. You go in the Miami airport, they're all around. You go in Walmart, especially around this time of year, they're all around. Books, you go in Sam's, wherever. It should be illegal. How can you, first of all, you don't mistreat someone who you think is equal to you. But if you're white, it's almost impossible for you not to be tainted with this type of notion when it's reinforced on a daily basis. The movies, the Jesus movies, the Ten Commandments, all the movies that are going to come out tomorrow, you're going to have a white Jesus. So when you look at this, your natural computer brain chip is going to say, wait a minute, well, God is obviously white because his son is white. So there's no way you're going to have equality in this country.
All right, hold that thought right there because we got to take a short break. Hang on a second, Jeremiah. We got to take a short break. Folks, you want to speak to Jeremiah Camara? Reach out to us. Our number is toll free. It's also worldwide. It's 800-450-7876. We'll take your calls next. It's a big show. It rolls on from Radio 1's flagship station. We're on FM 95.9 and AM 1450. WOL, where information is power.
News that's close to home. Close to home. Listen, WOL, News Talk 1450 AM and 95.9 FM.
And thanks for staying with us, folks. Our guest is a movie maker, is also an author. His name is Jeremiah Camara. You're probably familiar with him if you've heard of slave sermons. If you haven't, Google slave sermons and you'll understand what we're talking about on this Holy Week. Jeremiah, I got to ask you about Notre Dame Cathedral that burnt down, because it's big news, so I know you know about that. But what was startling was we have some African countries. I think one donated a million euros. Is something wrong with that picture? Are they suffering from the same thing that we're suffering stateside?
I mean, Carl, it's mind-boggling, to see the dedication that African people have to their white masters. I've spent a lot of time in Africa, and it's just the way that they service white people in many parts of Africa is just mind-boggling. There's a saying that says, if you're on your way to church and you see a white man, turn around because you've already seen God. Nigeria has the largest, if it's not the largest, it might be the second largest to Rio de Janeiro, the statue in Rio. But they just erected, I think in 2016, one of the largest statues in the world in Nigeria of a white Jesus. I have a friend, several friends from Nigeria, actually. And, I visited one of my friend's shops and he has a big, huge calendar of a white Jesus, right there. So it's insulting. It's stupefying. It defies all logic. But I understand why, those types of things exist. When you have blacks that are jockeying for position of priesthood, of bishophood, and looking to be beatified in this Christian realm. And like I tell people, you can call yourself Baptist, you can call yourself Methodist or whatever. You're Catholic. Okay, you're under that Catholic umbrella because you're a Protestant, yeah, but Catholicism set something for you to protest against. So if you hold the belief that that there's a God who and he had a son, he resurrected, all of these things like that, you're essentially Catholic. So tomorrow it's going to be, Sunday, it's going to be packed in the church. The first line of the Christian creed says, I believe in one God, Father, Almighty, maker of heaven and earth. So that's Catholicism. So I can understand that this means a lot to various African countries. Even some black people here in this country were torn by it. I don't think anyone was in it at the time, so no one got hurt. As far as that building is concerned, I see it as a metaphor for the burning of religion, because religion is dying. No one goes to church in Paris anyway. That was basically there for visitors. But no one goes to church in France. No one hardly goes in Britain anymore. I mean, you still have segments, but I think only 10% or less of the population in France even go to church. So I think they're more choked up by the building itself. One lady said that, I'm not a religious person, but when I saw the building burn down, I cried about it.
Yeah, because it's been there so long, and it's a tourist attraction. And they say with 13 million people just visit it each year. And here's the real deal: they're trying to get it rebuilt, if you will, before the Olympics comes, because they know that's another tourist draw. But for Black folks, what is it that from your investigations, what is it about this belief system? Why do we have to believe in something more than any other group? It seems like we pray harder, pray longer than our situation is still the same. What's going on there? Where's the disconnect?
Well, see, most people cannot fathom not believing in a God. Okay, and there are 4 steps that I think that people usually take to defend their position in believing in a God. The first thing that people are going to say, they insist that there is one due to their personal experiences, such as, hey, listen, I've actually heard Jesus. I saw his image. One lady told me she saw him coming out the water and all this type of stuff. And that kind of flies in the face of Exodus, I think is 33:20 or something like that, which says no one can see the face of God and live. Nevertheless, these incredible claims automatically places one in a place of position of exclusivity. They are implying that because they believe, they're able to have these miraculous experiences. They assume that non-believers are unable to have amazing experiences or miraculous stories to tell. But what they fail to realize is that one's experience always corresponds to their beliefs. So when you believe in leprechauns, the pot of gold can sometimes be seen. If no one was ever introduced to the God of the Bible, the stories would be much different. The experiences would be much different. If one, for instance, believes in Bigfoot or Sasquatch, then they would tell us about the time that they experienced the presence of Bigfoot. The second thing that keeps people locked in their beliefs are essentially what I call biblical black holes that suck one in deeply and prevent them from even questioning their belief. And one of the most powerful black holes is John 14:6. I am the way, the truth, and the light. No one comes to the Father except through me. That has scared the living daylights out of people. And this verse, stops the would-be curious dead in their tracks. If they question Jesus, they believe that they are forfeiting their opportunity to make it to heaven, and they won't gamble with their lives in such a way. So believers don't even make it to first base when it comes to even questioning the authenticity or validity of Jesus. And like I said, I'm not the only one. There are many people, but I've been, doing this for many, many years, and there are many, many saviors that preceded Jesus to have the same story. A mother named Mary died on the cross, called themselves the light of the world, ascended to heaven, had 12 disciples, resurrected after 3 days. This is a very, very old motif. And when you travel around the world, you see where many of these things, these stories come from. Another is Hebrew 1:11. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Now, they went through a great deal to define faith in dictionary terminology because they knew that they would ultimately encounter people, questioning this. So this trains you to believe that faith is actual substance when in reality it's not. It trains you to believe that you have faith, that what you have faith in is really here. And that's not always the case. This verse trains you to just have faith, no need to question anything. And of course, we have John 3:16, which by the way, says should not perish and not shall not perish. The third reason, Carl, is the tremendous level of fear that one has of going to hell, even though that's a made-up story. You have to go back to Dante's Inferno and other things. In fact, the devil started out blue because they said it was removed from the warmth of God. So, the fear is so strong that believers have never even wondered where the whole hellfire tale came from in the first place. It's very paralyzing. And the fourth thing that keeps people glued to their belief has to do with their disbelief in evolution, not because they understand the functions behind evolution, but because of the fact that evolution has been falsely presented as a linear phenomenon. This is the whole low-level ape to upright man image that we've grown accustomed to seeing. They don't perceive evolution as an endless variations that mutate to that which works for a particular environment and prunes that which doesn't. It's more like a tree. And so when you look at these things, this is one of the reasons why, we are just glued to belief and are afraid to question it. But Carl, the more I think about it, I don't think that we believe at all. I don't think anyone really believes. Matter of fact, I've never met a person that really believes in a God or a son, especially a son. Now, I'll tell you why. You got Taraji P. Henson, who's 48 years old, and she said that she's suffering from depression. She said because she doesn't have any privacy. She said, it wears on her. And she says she has to be conscious about everything she says and every move that she makes, everything that comes out of her mouth. She said, I have to go over it. She said, that's not living. Well, we're talking about Hollywood, Carl. Imagine if we were talking about a God constantly watching you. This invasion of privacy. Why don't believers feel their privacy is invaded by this very intrusive God that always is watching them? Not only is he judging you, but he's judging every thought that you had. The reason is because no one really believes there's an actual being watching them. Because if they did, there would be a shortage of human beings on the earth because of the extreme paranoia that would ultimately consume one's mind. You wouldn't do a lot of things. You look at the things that, whoever's listening that you did today, if you really, really, really believe that a God was watching you, you wouldn't have said that. You wouldn't have done that. You wouldn't have went there. You wouldn't have done this to this person or whatever. So I don't really think that we believe. In fact, it's a big insult when someone asks you, you believe in God or you don't believe in God. That's shamefully insulting because it's only in that type of subject when that would come up. It's only when it comes to their God will you ever hear such a question. Carl, do you believe?
Hold that thought right there, Jeremiah. Hold that thought right there. We got to take a short break. I'll let you finish your thought on the other side. And also, Michael in Washington, D.C. wants to speak to you. Folks, you too can join the discussion. 800-450-7876. Those are the numbers to get you in. We'll take your calls next on FM 95.9 and AM 1450. WOL, where information is power.
Carl Nelson Show is here daily from 4 to 7 p.m. on WOL. News Talk 1450 AM and 95.9 FM.
And thanks for staying with us, folks. Our guest is author, and he's also a movie maker. His name is Jeremiah Camara. Look him up, Google him, and you'll see the slave star. Just start watching that. And then give us a call. The number is 800-450-7876. So, Jeremiah, I'm going to let you finish your thought, and then we'll speak with Michael.
Yeah, I was saying that it's an insult. If someone says, man, you don't believe in God, Carl, do you believe I'm talking to you right now? I mean, do you believe that Mike is in front of you right now?
Right.
Why would you ask that about your God? And my reply is always, so you mean to tell me that your God is that obscure that one cannot know for sure? How to ask that question is an insult. African tradition before, this invasion of Christianity, we saw beauty, amazement, wonderment in everything, rocks and trees. We had respect for earth. That action is God. The action of, Carl, I am like one of the most, let me just keep it clean here. I'm really crazy when it comes to people littering. I have driven behind people that just throw trash out the window, styrofoam picnic, things out the window. You don't have respect for the environment, but yet you'll be in church on Sunday. Here in Atlanta, I can take you to places where there's just trash all around the church, but they're going to go in there dressed up, clean. Why can't you get the congregation to come out to church on Sunday and clean up the neighborhood? That is almost a magical thing that will transform Black people faster than just about anything that we can think of or anything that we can do if we clean our neighborhoods. Because it's the broken window principle. If you see one broken window, you're likely to break another one. You ever go into someone's house, Carl, you see the bathroom there is spotless, and you kind of tinkle a little bit around the rim, and you take a napkin and you wipe it. It's the same thing. But if it's already nasty, you can do what you want in that bathroom. No one's going to notice. That's what distinguishes us all across this country. You pretty much know when you come into a Black neighborhood. You're going to see litter, churches, liquor stores all around. These three things, they don't coincide because there's really no understanding of what you're into. How is it that on Sunday you're going to accept the story of your conquerors? Nobody's honest, Carl. You believe what you believe basically because, the biggest reason is where you live. Because if we were in Japan or we were in Iraq or if we were in Bangladesh or Mumbai, we wouldn't be talking about Christianity. We'd be talking about something else. So where you live is the biggest factor. Also, if your slave master had been Hindu, you would have been Hindu. I don't know why that's rocket science for people. This is a fact, but you still will defend it because you have so much invested in it. That's one of the 5 reasons. I do have, 5 reasons why people cling to their beliefs, and additional 5 reasons that are kind of, independent from why believers insist there's a God. But one of those have to do with pride. No one wants to admit that they were wrong or in the dark or misinformed, especially about something that they've clung to for so long. Pride prevents people from admitting that they wasted much time and energy and money over the years on something that they knew was fallacious and nonsensical.
Oh, well, hold that thought right there. 800-450-7876. Michael's next. He's calling from the district. Michael, you're on with Jeremiah.
Yes, good afternoon, good evening. I don't really believe in the traditional God that like the Bible or Muslims or whatever, but I know we all come from somewhere. We just didn't create ourselves. Maybe we were spawned by aliens or something, but there is a higher power somewhere that put everything together, intelligence or something. That's my point on that. But I hear a lot about, religion and everything is based on control. It's just to control you, to conform you, to get your money, your mind, or whatever it is that they're trying to control. But I hear a lot about white supremacists or white power on this program a lot. And I was wondering, can you talk about where the white people come from? I thought they came from Africa. They were created by Black people. So white people are here and put in the caves up in Europe or Caucasus Mountains, and somebody took them out of the mountains and taught them how to walk and talk and make fire. So the Black man created the white man, and the white man is doing exactly what he's supposed to do. survive and conquer and control. That's what he was bred to do. I mean, Africans back in the day, Kunta Kinte and all them, they fought and controlled and had the scrimmages. So why does anybody talk about, we created the white man, so he's doing exactly what we created him to do. So what's the problem?
All right, let's give him a chance to respond. Thanks, Michael. You want to tackle that first? Tackle that, because his question is.
I have no problem.
He says that they use as control. Yeah, control is, and he also said he believes in a supreme being, that somebody out there. Do you believe you're in agreement with that? That somebody created all of this stuff?
No, I'm not. Listen, Carl. Why don't we say that? First of all, what people will always say is there's a higher power, but the law of polarity says you can't have a higher power unless you have lower powers. So, what is a higher power? What is higher than you? When you are part of everything, you are stardust, like the trees, like the elephants, like the dog that's in your house. You all come from the same thing. It's just emanations from the one. So we all share, the same thing. Why couldn't it have been many, many different combinations of things that led to our existence? There are certain things that we don't know. You cannot have knowledge unless you have ignorance. You have to have a degree of ignorance in order to appreciate knowledge. That's a lot better to say I don't know than making up stories. Because gods were invented to explain natural phenomena and to manipulate, like my brother said, events and circumstances beyond the control of man. So the Bible is the source that tells us about this God character, who he is, where he lives, what he does, what he likes and dislikes, and with whom he chooses to have relationships, etc. But how would you know about this God if it weren't for the Bible? What would your concept of a God be then? Would you even have a concept of a God? Like I say, without the Bible, there's no creation story. There's no Adam and Eve, no Abraham, no Moses, no virgin birth, no Jesus, no heaven or hell. All of these stories and heroes are directly associated with this God character. So if one's information about the God that they believe in comes solely from the pages of the Bible, then we can say with certainty that if the Bible didn't exist, neither would their particular belief. That's just a fact.
So let me interrupt you and ask you this, though. So did you believe that the stories in the Bible, and there are many stories, all were not actually made up, but it was stolen from Africa? From
I don't believe that. I don't believe that. I know that. You can go to Egypt and see the resurrection. You can see many of the stories. You can go to Iran or was formerly known as Persia and see a lot of the stories. Egypt tells you about, the water, how life emerged from water. The Bible is a retelling of pre-existing myths and legends. Now they did have a weighing of hearts, so to speak, in ancient Egypt. But that's a lot different than the judgmentalism God that we have right now, which I think is probably one of, if not the most damaging aspects of belief, is that of a judgmental God. Judgmentalism is the great destroyer of creativity. And you can ask any artist that's listening, I play piano, and I know that my playing improved once I stopped judging myself. Okay? No one likes to be judged. So why would you want a God that not only judges your actions, but judges your thoughts? And this is why that judgmentalism is why humans can't function properly if they're constantly being judged. No one can. That's no way to live. That's why I brought up Taraji P. Henson. If you're talking about that just on a Hollywood level, imagine that on another level, where if you actually could see these eyes watching you, all 8 billion of us, everywhere you went, you wouldn't you wouldn't do half the things that you did. Not, I would say maybe 90% of the things that you do or say or go. You couldn't live like that. That's why I don't think you really believe. But Christianity allows you to play a game in the bottom of the ninth. When the game is almost over, you can say, well, look, forgive me for all that I did. I accept you, with my heart. I believe you with my mind. And therefore, I'm asking you for forgiveness. You can play that game. It allows you to play that type of game.
Tell you what, hold that thought right there because we're going to take another short break. I'll let you finish that thought on the other side. Folks, you too can join us. Speak to Jeremiah Camara. Reach out to us at 800-450-7876. We'll take your calls after this very short break on FM 95.9 and AM 1450. WOL, where information is power.
The Tom Joyner Morning Show and Carl Nelson in the afternoon on 1450 and 95.9 WOL.
And thanks for rolling with us, folks. Our guest is Jeremiah Camara. Jeremiah is an author, is also a movie maker. Many of you know him from the slave sermons that he did and all his books and all his documentaries. He's got a new one out now titled Holy Hierarchy, the Religious Roots of Racism. We'll get back to him in a second. Let me just tell you, coming up tomorrow, you're going to hear from Dr. Walter Williams. Now, he's put, I think it might have been 10 grand or 5 grand. It's been so long. If you can prove that a man named Jesus the Christ or Muhammad the Prophet actually walked on the face of this earth, that money's yours. You'll be here tomorrow, along with Sister Pam Africa. She's got some update on what's happening with Mumia Abu Jamal. Also, Brother Obi is going to talk to us about the cyclone, the hurricane, as we call it on this side of the world, that hit Southwest Africa. And so far, the people have sort of ignored it. They raised $1 billion for the Notre Dame Cathedral in 2 days, and they still haven't a handout yet for those folks who died in that cyclone in Africa. Anyway, Brother Obi's going to be here to talk about that. Let's go back to Jeremiah. Jeremiah, I'm going to let you finish your thought.
Yeah, I don't remember where I was, Carl.
All right. Well, let me ask you this, though.
Of judgmentalism. Yes, sir.
Let me ask you this, because I know you weren't reared like this. You probably went to church probably a lot more often than most of us. Most of us, especially coming up in Easter, you go to that, 3-5 hour services that we had to go to. You get your Easter dressed up. If for the girls, they got a new dress, and the women are wearing hats. And brothers got new suits and new shoes and going to church for this long service. Did you go through that? And if so, when did you sort of had your epiphany?
Absolutely, I went through it. I remember having a hat and, some new shoes. I was mad. They were suede, actually. I was mad. I got dirt on. I went through that. But you grow up, Carl. One of the things that I realized as I became a young adult, because I've been free from the bondage of religion since I was about 21 years old, 21 or 22 years old. And so one of the things is that really struck me was that Christianity is belief driven. It's not deed driven. It's belief driven. And this is why we know that man played the greatest role in what one believes. It's proof that he created it. It was important for the Roman government, the Catholic priests, etc., that people agreed and accepted their program, that would ultimately control the masses. It's a legacy that fosters sexism, racism, intolerance of difference, the desecration of the natural environment, etc. And they adapted their Christianity to appeal to the Roman government, and they won unprecedented authority and privilege. So like I told you the last time I was on the show, I hire nothing but felons. I've had 21 felons that has worked for me over the years. This is all I seek. I'll even put an ad in the paper, felons welcome, And so, but according to, forget all that, I'm going to hell because I don't believe. So it's not recognizing deeds. You could be a good person, you could help people, you could do this, you could do that. But if you don't believe in your heart and confess with your mouth that Jesus died for your sins, you're doomed to hell, which there is no such place. See, no one can tell you about a hell because you cannot experience non-existence. That's why the whole idea of an afterlife is erroneous, because your afterlife is already embedded in the DNA that you left here, that you come from, the mitochondria. When I'm gone physically, my children have that. But you can't experience non-existence. If that's the case, what is this, 2019? So where were you in 1819? Where were you in 1719 when we needed you? Where were you in 1619? Where were you a year before you were born? You have no recollection because that's non-existence. You weren't here. Non-existence in the material three or multi-dimensional world. You may have existed on another plane, but it's not a conscious one that you can recall. So death should not be this spooky thing. You're just going to be non-existent. People who experience death are the ones that are left behind. Like when my mother just passed in August, I experienced that. I'm the one that grieved behind that, not my mother. She left this earth from a physical standpoint, but I had to grow up, Carl, and realize that after I read Malcolm X's biography, one of the things that it did for me, I read it when I was 19 years old, okay? And one of the things that book did for me, it let me understand that there are reasons for everything. There are reasons why you don't like your nappy hair, why you don't like your big nose, why you don't like your big lips, why you don't like your dark skin, why you're a Christian, why you're this and that. There are reasons why everything exists. And I started to explore these reasons. And so going to church, I realized, Carl, and everyone else realized, if they're honest, and that's the problem. We're not honest, we're disingenuous. Because when you step foot in the church on Sunday, I guarantee you that you will hear the same thing that you've heard most of your life since you were little. They're going to say it maybe in a more bombastic way, in a more, dramatic way. They'll rearrange the words. They'll say it, but it's basically the same stuff you've always been hearing. And that is detrimental to your intellect. That does nothing to advance your intellect. Now, I want to just say this, Carl. Right now, we are in the age of cameras. Okay, there's a camera on every corner, right? You can't do anything anymore without a camera spotting you. Okay, this is a perfect opportunity for Jesus to show his face, to show how he helped Steph Curry's 3-point shot go in. We got you on tape. We got you on video. But you notice all the miracles, all the parting of the seas, all of the chariots swirling up into heaven, the sun standing still, all of these miracles, which are nothing but fables that you read in the Bible. Once the video camera comes in, and the camera is invented, all that stops. There'll be no more parting of waters. There'll be no more blind a blind person's sight being restored, because the camera can capture that now. We capture everything. You got your cell phone. You can do that. So Sunday, you'll see women and men with new clothes, and they'll stand up 50 times in church when they wouldn't before, because they want you to see that outfit. It's a game. It's entertainment. We like to be entertained. But don't piss in my ear and tell me that it's raining. You can't con a man that knows.
Well, let me ask you this. Let me interrupt you and ask you this. What would it take to make you a believer? Would you have to see the Red Sea part? Would you have to see somebody come, the blind see? Would you have to, because a lot of times they have explanations for all these, whether it be scientific or geographical. Yeah. So what would it take for you to convince you that, wow, the person who said, see, God did it. What would it take for you?
Well, listen, Carl, that's a hypothetical. Now, let me answer that this way. As a musician, Okay, I'm not in a band or anything, but I play. That's one of my hobbies. I'm around the house. I play the piano a lot. Okay, music is a theory. If I press C, E, and G together at the same time, that's a chord. That's a major chord. But we still call it music theory. But every time that I press that, it resonates as a C major chord. Everything that I've tested has come true, even though it's a theory, because that's what people say about evolution. Well, Jeremiah, this evolution, that's that white man. That doesn't belong to a race. Science doesn't belong to a race. Ignorant people like Steve Harvey just don't understand it. You haven't taken any time to try to learn it. So I would have to, I'm a believer in music because I've tested it over and over and over and over, and I get the same results from minor chords, from dominant chords, from diminished chords, over and over and over. That's never been done with Christianity. Everyone will say that all their prayers are answered. I don't want to call you a liar. Let's just say you're being disingenuous, because you wouldn't have that arthritis in your knee right now if all your prayers were answered. No one's prayers are always answered, and those things that are answered happen in time or proactivity. You did something, or somebody did something to you for it to happen. We got to understand, Carl, that amazement, wonderment, mysticism, all of these things are intrinsic to life itself. Life comes with these things. And if you have some tenure on earth, you're going to see all of these things. I've been able to do and achieve great things, according to me, in my life. And never once did I drop down on my knees and ask for it. Listen, Carl, I am a straight man. It kind of bothers me a little bit, just as a straight man. No disrespect to those who are not straight. Who cares? Nobody's indicting gay people. I mean, I've got gay people that I deal with, and, they were part of the filmmaking and all of this type of stuff. Nobody's talking about that, so let's not misconstrue what I'm saying. I'm saying that as a straight man, it just does something to me to say, well, you're going to lean in the arms, the everlasting arms of Jesus. No, listen, I don't want to lean in another man's arms. Sometimes as men, we have to walk into the storm. We can't run from it and say, well, I'm going to pray for it. I'm going to pray about it. That's what distinguishes us from most groups. When there's a problem, other groups, they go out and make it. They do work to fix it. With black people, we're going to pray on it. We pray about it. And that is what separates you from your success that you rightfully deserve or rightfully could attain. But what distinguishes successful people from unsuccessful people largely has to do with how they spend their time. We're going to spend a lot of time Sunday, and after that, we're going to go to the buffet. Doesn't matter if we're overweight, we're going to go to the buffet, we're going to get a whole bunch of other calories. You waste it, and the day is probably going to be beautiful. Like right here in Atlanta, today it is simply gorgeous. It's been gorgeous for the last 3 days here. Beautiful. Why would I want to mess that up indoors with a suit on, listening to the same stuff that I've been hearing my whole life? It is an incredible waste of time, money, and intelligence.
All right, hold that thought right there. We're closing on the top of the hour, so we got to take a short break. So some of our stations can identify themselves down the line. Stations like FM 95.9 and AM 1450, WOL, where information is power.
Welcome to the Carl Nelson Show
on Washington, D.C.'s 1450 WOL radio and live around the world on WOLDCnews.com.
Thanks for staying with us, folks. 6 o'clock straight up on the East Coast. Our guest is Jeremiah Camara. He's an author. He's also a movie maker. His latest product is called Holy Hierarchy, The Religious Roots of Racism in America. He does a lot of research in how the black church, he says, keeps down the black community, and he provides empirical proof of that. 800-450-7876, number to call. You'd like to speak to him. Jeremiah, I'm going to let you finish your thought, then I got a tweet question for you.
Yeah, sure. One thing that we got to understand, Carl, always keep in mind, is that every species, from a tree to a human, has certain things that they need in order to exist and to thrive. Okay? As a human, we're carbon-based. Okay? We're dependent upon the sun. All right. The first thing that we have to do is recognize that we're human, and to be human requires certain things to survive and thrive. Humans need oxygen, water, sleep, food, clothing, shelter, etc. But belief in a God is not a biological requirement. This means that if you don't believe in a God, there are no threats to our existence. The only threat is what we believe in our minds. Gods and sons of gods, etc., are all in our minds, is what you were told. But if we were in Japan, we would be talking about Shintoism. If we were in certain parts of India, we would be talking about Hinduism. We're talking about Christianity right now because I'm in Atlanta and you're in Maryland. That's it. It's time to be honest about that.
All right. Here's a tweet question for you. Ask your guest about pedophilia attached to the Roman Catholic Church. Priests
Exactly.
not allowed to be married, a haven for pedophilia. I want you to talk about that.
Exactly. It's mind-boggling, Carl. And the brother that's coming on your show that's talking about, the people that were killed in Africa, and we're talking about this church being burned in France. And every time you come on CNN, they're talking about, what the prince did, and I could care less about what the prince did, who the prince is, or whoever he or she is. It doesn't have anything to do with me. And it's just crazy that the news also, for a while, was obsessed with Michael Jackson and R. Kelly. And you have thousands of priests who have molested and sexually abused tens of thousands of children. Now, if you want me to talk about or have a conversation about R. Kelly, I will once we start talking about the Catholic priests. See, that whole priesthood is something that is not a human thing. It's not human to take a vow of abstinence. That's not human. Humans procreate. That's what we do. And again, don't misconstrue this. Oh, well, he's, with gay. I'm not. Listen, I do think that some people are born with, men might be born with more estrogen. My uncle was gay. I loved him dearly, but he definitely had more estrogen than he had testosterone. So things happen that way. This is no indictment on homosexuality. I'm talking about a conscientious decision to abstain. That's not normal. And this is why they, when a little boy walks past, they might feel some type of attraction to him. They have no other release. No one told you to do that. You did that. And it's crazy because in the Philippines, it's two people that can come to the Philippines, and as many millions of people that there are in the Philippines, you can hear a pin drop when a Manny Pacquiao comes, or the priest. And the priest goes to the Philippines and encourages them to mate. You have so many children in the Philippines now who are parentless. They're roaming the streets. You know, a child followed me for blocks, begging for money. No parent was around. You have, you know, it's not uncommon to have 8 children in one family. That's very common. Who are you to say be fruitful and multiply when you took this vow of abstinence? And the nuns. It's not normal to walk around in a black suit all day long in the sunshine. It's not normal. But this is what our, you know, belief right now. This is the foundation of what we believe right now. Come from perverted Catholic priests. Okay, you know, you had, you know, certain things in the priesthood that were just perverted in terms of what a human being does. Okay, a human being is a curious being. We're a very curious species, and you had people like Bishop Irenaeus cautioning us not to seek answers, you know, and that everyone discovers for himself, but rather to accept in the faith that which the church teaches. That's perversion. You can't tell my brain what to, you know, you terrified people with threats of the devil and witchcraft. The Catholic Church almost wiped out all of education, technology, science, medicine, you know, history, art, commerce, etc. And they amassed great wealth when the rest of society suffered. So all of it is perversion. Their actions, you know, I mean, you know, they made it illegal, Carl. A Theodosian law, somewhere in 435 or something like that. They made it illegal to disagree with the church. And no one could have any public discussions of religion in public. You still find that to this day. Well, I don't talk about politics or religion. This all goes back. You can't understand where you are now unless you go back to where we've been. What was forced upon you? You know, they decided in the Council of Ephesus in 431 that Mary could be safely worshipped. That's a Catholic thing. And then when they announced that, you know, the crowds burst into celebration. You know, so you got Catholic people in their cars. They got this Mother Mary and all this type of stuff, and you can best believe there was a meeting behind that allowed you to worship her safely. I mean, this is crazy. So, Carl, what I'm saying is that we live in a society. We are in a nation and an establishment. And there's no compensation whatsoever. No financial compensation, no any type of compensation for anyone who chooses to question the establishment. You know, you had a person on your show the last time I was on accusing me of having an agenda. Now, I don't come with swords or crusades. I'm not a part of any inquisition. I don't come with weapons. I'm not trying to change you. I'm not trying to say don't believe or believe. What I'm doing is offering you another perspective. That's it. Not, hey, you shouldn't believe in it. You believe what you want to believe in. That is your choice. But what I'm doing is I'm offering you a different perspective that you may not have heard before.
Well, I got another tweet for you. The tweeter says, ask the brother, would he be a believer if all the characters in the Bible were black?
Absolutely not. That would be more insulting. Absolutely not. You know, you got people that spend their lifetime want to dip Jesus in chocolate. Okay? I'm telling you that people like Joshua, the 31 cities that Joshua allegedly conquered, they never existed. There's nothing. There's no record. They combed the area of so-called Mount Sinai, that area where there were people that was supposed to have wandered for 40 years, and, you know, they couldn't find a cup, a spoon, a wagon wheel, nothing. Now, you could save Michael Jackson's sequin glove, but you couldn't save the nail that Jesus was, you know, nailed up to the stake or the cross or whatever you want to call it. You didn't save that. You didn't save that cross. You didn't save the garments that he wore that day. And he was the son of God, but you would save Michael Jackson's glove and Elvis's blue suede shoes. If you say Jesus is black, that's more insulting. Here it is, you got a black savior that doesn't do anything for you. That's crazier. You know, you go up, you know, I was in D.C.
Hold that thought about D.C. Yeah, hold that thought right there, Jeremiah. We're going to take another short break. I'll let you tell the D.C. story on the other side. Folks, you too can reach out to us and join us at 800-450-7876. Our guest is Jeremiah Camara. We'll take your calls next on FM 95.9 and AM 1450 WOL, where information is power.
To home, close to home. Listen, WOL News Talk 1450 AM and 95.9 FM.
And thank you for staying with us, folks. Our guest is Jeremiah Camara. As I mentioned, he's an author. He's a movie maker. Writes a lot of books. He delves into the issue of religion and how it affects the black community. I want to hear from some of our Bible scholars out there. 800-450-7876. Those are the numbers to speak to Jeremiah. Jeremiah, I'm going to let you finish your story. You tell us about a story about what happened in Washington, D.C.
Well, yeah, I was in D.C. In November or December of 2017. And, of course, I rolled by, you know, several churches. Of course, I was also there in 2012 before I made my first film, Contradiction. And there were a number of churches that depicted black Jesuses. You know, one really prominent church that depicted a picture of a black Last Supper. Now, when you have something like this, what you are and what you're going to be doing on Easter and what you've been doing for many years, you just are essentially a poor imitation of your conqueror. So he had a Last Supper, so you got a Last Supper, you know. And you made him black. You made all the people at the Last Supper black. Now, that's insulting when you're on the bottom of every category. You're on the bottom health-wise. You're on the bottom educational-wise. You're on the bottom economically. Okay? But yet Jesus is black? And he allows you to be on the bottom. Listen, if you're going to have a God, you have to invent one and tailor it to coincide with your story. You need a God who was thrown off the bus, a God that was, lived in Jim Crow. You need a God who was kidnapped from his home. You need a God that was in bondage. Okay, you need a guy who had children, all right, whose children were sold. You need a guy who had been whipped. You need a guy who was told that he was ugly because of various features. This is, you create your God like they created their God to suit their needs. You create your own God to suit your needs. When you go, here it is on Easter, when you read that story of the Bible, the Gospels, Here's a man who basically had a bad weekend from Friday to Sunday. That's why they call it the Passion. But you had a grandfather who had a bad life. You had a grandfather who...
Hopefully we haven't lost him.
died.
Oh, there we go.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you dropped out for a second, because anything happens while you're speaking, they're going to say, who did it. But go ahead.
Yeah, right, exactly. But you had a grandfather who went his whole life, abused, tormented, whipped, beaten, children sold, etc. How is it that you are going to have more compassion for this Jesus figure, character in the Bible, who essentially had a bad weekend, than you do for your grandfather, your great-grandfather, your ancestors who had a bad life? It is mind-boggling. Again, it's stupefying. It defies all logic and senses.
Let me ask you this: when you came to this point in your life where you are now, did you get any pushback from family and friends when you started talking about this? That this is all a fabrication and that the Bible was made up and there's no such thing as Jesus? Did you get any pushback from family and friends?
No. My parents believed in me. They loved me. They didn't judge me. They saw the things that I was doing, and my mother just passed at 90 years old. She took my book, Holy Lockdown, and gave it to all of her friends. Even though she went to church, she was a Christian. We joked. I would fly her down here to Atlanta, and I would say, just joke with her. My children would. They would say, Grandma, who do you love the most? Baba or Jesus? And she would say, Jesus. And I would joke with her. I say, I'm going to let Jesus buy your plane ticket next time. And we'd laugh about it. But there was nothing really serious about it. She accepted the fact that she had a son that was thinking. It's very hurtful, Carl, to have that experience. I know many, many people that had that experience of having family members that denied them. My sister has a friend who wrote a book, and her mother had kept some of the books. When she went to retrieve the books, her mother said, "Listen." Well, she was going out of town to visit her mother's mother, her grandmother, and her grandmother said, "Listen, don't bring those books because it has nothing to do with God." And she asked her mother, she said, "You feel the same way?" She said, "Yeah." She said, "Well, I'm coming to get my books that I left over there." Her mother said, "I threw them away." This is the kind of stuff that goes on. Like, Carl, I can't be a non-believer in the black community. There's no rewards for this. I do this to impart my love for people. But there's no rewards for this. There's reward for me because I'm free, and I get letters all the time of people that have been moved by my work. Okay? But as black people, we don't allow diversion of thought. I got to be a Democrat. I got to be for Obama. I got to do this, or I'm going to be called this, label that. But in terms of my experiences, Carl, I've never really gotten any pushback. Never. I've never gotten pushback from family. They know where I stand. Okay? And it may be my ability to convey where I stand. And this is why I tell people, before you go out there with your trumpet of truth that you have discovered, make sure that you commit to memory at least 10 rebuttals that you know you're going to hear, because they're going to just say the same thing. You're not going to get people that want you to believe. They're very limited. They're going to say, well, I know he's this because like I mentioned earlier, because experience. I saw him, Like I said, not understanding that your belief corresponds with your experience. But get you about 10 things that you know they're going to throw back at you and have a real solid answer for that. And we can always, like I said, look out on the horizon in every major U.S. city and see the empirical evidence of what your God is not doing for you. Now, you had the brother here in Atlanta, Killer Mike, that has a show on Netflix, and he went to Creflo Dollar's church. And he told Creflo, he said, listen, religion is, killing black folk. And Creflo, only thing he could say was, well, let's just say this, they're not doing it right. So you mean to tell me that we were enslaved because we weren't praying right? That we have the highest level of incarceration because nobody can get it right? Not one church can get it right. And every church would say, well, my church is different. You understand? Because my pastor preaches this. That is a myth. Your pastor is no different than any other pastor. They all preach pretty much the same thing. My wife took me off of the speaking circuit because she handled, the financial part of it, because I was at a point, I was speaking all over. I was invited to various churches to speak. And we went to this one church, church to speak in New York. And I got my honorarium. The people, they pretty much didn't even clap when he introduced me. But when I got to talking, they didn't want me to get off. And I was on the panel with 7 other preachers. It was in Brooklyn. And the honorarium that I got was not the honorarium that the preachers got. And my wife rightfully felt some kind of way about that. But they'll go and hoop and holler and tell you some stuff that you already know, get $4,000 or $5,000 just to show up. And here's a man that's done his research, that knows the game that they're playing, and he gets a fraction of what they get, because we're in a world, so to speak, that does not compensate you financially for questioning the establishment.
All right, hold that thought right there. We're going to take another short break. We'll come back. I want to ask you a question. I'll tell you a story about Nipsey Hussle's mother, what she said at his funeral. Folks, you too can join our discussion. 800-450-7876. Those are the magic numbers to get you in to speak to Jeremiah Camara. We'll take your calls after this short break on FM 95.9 and AM 1450 WOL, where information is power.
Carl Nelson Show is here daily from 4 to 7 p.m. on WOL. News Talk 1450 AM and 95.9 FM.
And thanks for rolling with us, folks. Our guest is movie maker and author. His name is Jeremiah Camara. If you've heard of the Slave Sermons, this is the man who puts them out. If you haven't, go check them out. Just Google Slave Sermons and you'll know what Jeremiah is all about. Jeremiah, before we left the break, I was telling about Nipsey Hussle at his funeral. His mother was, I guess, eulogized him, they would say. She probably wouldn't use that word to describe what she said. And she called on the ancestors. She called out their names. She also did libations. And she mentioned that, that he's a spirit and he's not really dead, just moved on into another dimension. I said that, and she did more stuff that African side, people will know what they do at so-called funerals. And black people were writing that they said she was crazy, that they had never seen that stuff before. And luckily she wasn't in a church. She's at the Staples Center. So she poured libations and the whole thing about calling on the ancestors. They said they never heard of that stuff and that she was nuts. I just want to get your thoughts about that.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, that just goes to show you the lack of exposure, Carl, that we have. She's right. You're passed on to the ancestors. You are here in the realm of the of the ancestry that you left here on this earth. That shows the lack of exposure. And I tell people, one of the most powerful things on this earth as it relates to humans, okay, is a mentor. Name me something more powerful than a mentor. A lot of these people, they just have never heard anybody talk like that. What we're talking about now, and Carl, this is why I thank you for this show, man. I mean, we don't have this. You have a platform for the truth to be heard. Thank you. I really appreciate you. You take, at my wife's office at her job, for some reason, only one radio station was working. And that was the radio station here in Atlanta. That was Steve Harvey's radio station. He comes on, and he preaches, and he preaches, and he preaches, and he preaches, and he preaches. Now, he would say that it's because of God that he has all this. Well, that's a slap in the face for everyone who's written a check to him, who's helped him along the way, who supported him, who signed the contract for him to do the work. But this is typical black people. Whatever happens to you, you're not going to give another person credit. You're going to thank Jesus, thank God. And this is why we won't do for each other. You're not going to thank me anyway. I've had those experiences many times in my life where I've helped people and the first thing comes out of my mouth, oh, thank you, Jesus. No, Jesus didn't do this. I did this. You should be thanking the person in front of you who did this. But you're taught to give thanks in everything. But why don't you give thanks to the bad things that happen? And I just want to make a point real quick, and I don't want to lose people who are not musicians. There are several people that play music. So I'm going to keep it simple to where people who don't play music or understand music can still understand where I'm coming from. In music, you have this thing called a dominant chord. A dominant chord is full of tension. It wants to be resolved. It wants to go somewhere. It's normally a 5 chord. It wants to go. If I sing happy birthday to you, that has a dominant chord in it. If I say, happy birthday to, that 2 is waiting to go somewhere. I can't leave it like that. It's got to come to you. That's called the church modes. We get that. Man, it has to resolve. It can't stay there. Well, that's what life is about. Life is always, whether you go to church, whether you don't, whether you believe or whether you don't believe, you're not exempt from anything that everybody else gets. You're going to have tension, and then you're going to have resolution. I'm going to use another word for tension. I'm going to say dissonance. You're going to have dissonance, and you're going to have resolution all throughout your life, every day. When you got up in the morning, Carl, your teeth weren't brushed, that's dissonance. When you brushed your teeth, you resolved it. When you were on your way to work, that was dissonance. When you arrived, that's resolved. When you're hungry, that's dissonance. When you ate, that's resolved. That's what life is about, is dissonance and resolution. And this is why the church is not beneficial, because they don't put you in the spirit of resolution. The church teaches you to pray about it, to lean on God, to say a prayer. Prayer is not resolution. It doesn't resolve anything. In order to fix our problems, we have to stay and remain in the spirit of resolution. It's the music of life. That's why when you see people, who continue to have problems over and over, they have problems resolving. But it doesn't matter what you believe in, you're going to have resolution and you're going to have dissonance. We need to be in resolution mode so we can resolve these things. You see, the church tells you if you believe in this, all you got to do is believe, and I'm going to tell you, your problems are going to be over, and you're going to have. That's not how life works. Your problems are never going to be over. All these people who believe, they get the same thing we all get. They get arthritis. They get high blood pressure. They get kidney stones. Their sons go to prison. They get evicted. They get foreclosed on. They get fired. They're unemployed. What does it do? It doesn't matter. It's not what happens to you. It's how you respond to what happens to you. So this is one of the reasons why I'll drink occasionally, but I can never drink or smoke or do anything else when I have problems because I can't figure them out. I can't resolve them. And the church keeps you drunk on Jesus. You are intoxicated with belief. And then you wonder why your problems never resolve. And then you say, well, God is testing me. Well, you've been tested. It's 10 years now. That's a long test. But they don't steer you in the direction of resolution, because the direction of resolution is something you can handle with your mind. You can think about it instead of praying about it, instead of, believing about it. Because no matter what you do in this life, you are bound, not by what some God wants you to do, but you're bound by the laws of the universe that were here before you were here and are going to be here long after. You got the law of attraction, the law of rhythm, the law of polarity, the law of vibration, the law of oneness, the law of relativity, the law of gender, the law of action. These things are real and they're going on whether you believe it or not. They're happening. So you called me to be on the show, okay, based off of some universal principle. There was an attraction that was there. That which is likened unto itself is attracted, or your listeners, who you say often request me coming on. That's the law of attraction that's going on right there. If you jump off a building head first, onto the concrete, it doesn't matter what you believe. The law of gravity is going to split your brains open. But we've been told that God is the governor. No, it's universal principles that govern these things, and we have to move beyond that. And like I said, recognize that we're human. And as a human being, if you don't believe, if you don't accept the Bible, there are no threats to your existence or to your ability to thrive. I've lived a life where I have thrived, and I have not believed. I have not prayed. I have not put my time and effort into that because I abide by universal principles. I know that the law of compensation says that I cannot receive more than what I have put out. That's a fancy way of saying you reap what you sow. That's not religion. That's a universal principle. You do reap what you sow. So it's time for us to get into the spirit of resolution to resolve that cord that needs resolving. It's stuck on, if you say a simple song, do you know the Muffin Man who lives on Drury? Drury, that's the tension. It's got to finish. Lane, it's got to come down to the one chord. We have this state of dissonance in the black community that we are not resolving our song because we're not in the spirit of resolution.
All right. Tell you what, hold that thought right there. We got some folks who want to talk to you, and we got to take a short break. Folks, you want to speak to our guest. His name is Jeremiah Camara. His latest project is called Holy Hierarchy, the Religious Roots of Racism. He's done a lot of stuff about the black church and the black community, and he says the black community is coming up short because of the black church. And you can just Google him and Google race sermons, and you'll understand what we're talking about. 800-450-7876, and that should be slave sermons, rather. You should Google. We'll take your calls after this short break on FM 95.9 and AM 1450. WOL, where information is power.
Tom Joyner Morning Show and Carl Nelson in the afternoon on 1450 and 95.9 WOL.
And thank you for staying with us, folks. Our guest is author and movie maker. His name is Jeremiah Camara. That's his name. You Google him and you find out more about him. As I mentioned before we left, his latest project is called Holy Hierarchy, the Religious Roots of Racism in America. And he does a lot of work investigating how the black church holds back the black community. Number to call to speak to him is 800-450-7876. Got some folks in Baltimore who want to talk to you. But before we do that, let me just remind you, coming up tomorrow, we're going to speak with Dr. Walter Williams. Also, Brother Obi's going to join us, and Pam Africa from the MOVE organization has got an update on what's going on with Mumia Abu Jamal. So if you're in the DMV, tell all your friends to keep their radios locked on FM 95.9 and also AM 1450 WOL. Let's go to line 3. Ernest is calling us from B-More. Ernest, thank you for being so patient. You're on with Jeremiah.
Thank you and your guests for taking my call. Now that fire in France at that cathedral, I noticed one thing, that it burned for 9 hours. The smoke was always white, meaning that it got a lot of oxygen, and we don't see the dust that we saw in 9/11. No dust at all. Nothing was pulverized. So that tells me something, that probably explosive was probably used in 9/11 that would cause the building to turn into dust and all the people that burned in that building to be dust. Now, the Catholic Church, the Church of England, and all those white churches over there participated in the slave trade. So, after you get older and you understand what's happening, religion is just not what it said it is. You participating in the slave trade, you causing wars all over the world. Religion, money, all caused wars and destruction all over the world. So, if you was a religious person, you'd be trying to help somebody. Not trying to kill people. The Sephardic Jews from Spain, Portugal, participated in the slave trade. So, what is your thoughts on this?
Yeah, Carl, can you hear me?
Sure. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you,
yeah.
Ernest.
I mean, thank you for the call. Definitely. That's what befuddles me. All of them were participants in the slave trade. The hardest thing for believers to accept is that, and I said this the last time I was on, that practically all of their aspects of their beliefs are based upon European, medieval, dark age ideology that evolved from fear, panic, hysteria, sexism, superstition, and ignorance. Nearly every aspect of one's faith can be traced to back to one of the various council meetings, the Crusades, the Inquisitions, the Protestant Reformation, the witch hunts, the plagues of Europe. during the Christian era, between 100 and 1500. So, it just like men created a constitution with all the ideas that define a nation, so did man create a Bible and a belief system with all the ideas within it that define and govern those who believe it. It is a system of control, and we are being controlled like puppets. We look real silly on Easter, dressed up with our hats on, going to church, talking about you getting ready to worship the Lord, and some of us can barely walk. You're in pain. You go, what does it do? What is it doing? And see, that you have no fringe benefits on earth because you get what everybody else gets. So you'll sum it up by saying, well, it says, those who believe, no one can come to the Father unless he, goes through Christ. So everything is based upon your afterlife because there's nothing in this life. Like, for instance, the metaphor of Moses going up to the mountain and talking to God and coming down with the tabernacle and his beard was white. That was a sign when his brother Aaron saw him that says, damn, what happened? He said, and he saw God. That's a metaphor, okay? In a story, in a fable. If you talk to this God who knows everything, all the hairs on your head, he knows how many there are. He knows how many grains of sand. And even more miraculous than that, he knows how many stars are in the universe. You actually had an encounter with a being like that, and yet you are no smarter than anybody else. I mean, Carl, listen, man. If Herbie Hancock sat with me for an hour, I would never be the same musically. Here's this guy that you claim comes to visit you. You talk to him. He talks to you. But what do you have? You're riddled with disease. You got the same problems that we all have. It's not working. Well, I know my prayer works. Well, see, now you're being disingenuous. It's called confirmation bias. You are biased toward your belief.
All right, let me flip it a little then, because since you mentioned Herbie Hancock, what about people like a Herbie Hancock or a Michael Jordan, who people will say they're blessed, that God blessed them with these talents? How do they become so much better than the rest of us, whatever talent they have?
Okay, Herbie Hancock started out in Chicago at 4 or 5 years old. Okay, Carl, you would be great. If you started playing piano consistently since you were 4, you would be outstanding. Mm-hmm. You see, I just saw an artist here in Atlanta the other day. He started out, he was touring at 4 years old. I saw another pianist. He started at 4. Okay. Mr. Jordan, you're 6'6". Shaq, you're 7 feet tall. Mr. LeBron, you're 6'8", 250. Kobe, you're 6'6", 6'7". Steph Curry, your dad played pro ball. You've probably been shooting right after you came out the womb. And the reason why you have this fanaticism when you make a shot and you point up to whoever or whatever, your mom was a missionary. So you say that you found God at 8 years old. You didn't find anything at 8. It found you. It came to you. That was your upbringing in your life. Everything that you can do, you can account for it some kind of way. My youngest daughter is an artist. Okay, she can paint, She can draw. She has an artistic touch on everything that she does. Okay. Now, that was something, because one day I told her to draw a pair of boots. And when I saw that she drew these boots in proportion, I was like, whoa, you can really draw. Now, that's something that she has. She was born with that, probably. Her perception of shape and space. That's something that some people have. But in order for you to be great, you have to expound upon it. You have to practice. You know how many hours that Steph Curry spent in the gym dribbling and shooting? No wonder he's good. But it's fanaticism to point up every time after you hit it. Why couldn't you just say, look, Lord, I'm going to thank you for every 3-point shot that I'm going to get today. I thank you for it. But no, if that was a Muslim that did some type of Muslim ritual after a shot, there's no way that would be accepting. Or if that was a Satanist, which I respect, because they understand that there's no such thing as Satan. But what they're saying, if you could put the Ten Commandments, or the monument of Ten Commandments here, then why can't we put a monument of Satan here?
Right. Actually, hold that thought right there, because Marvin's been holding for a while, and we're racing the clock, and I know he's got a question for you. He's calling from Baltimore. He's on line 4. Marvin, your question for Jeremiah.
Yes. Hello? Hello?
Yes, you're on the air.
Okay. My question to him, let me ask you this, because I was trying to get through before when you was on like a year ago. Do you believe in God? I'm not saying you believe in Jesus. Do you believe that there is a God that created this universe?
It doesn't matter what I believe. My beliefs have no bearing on, because my beliefs have no bearing on you or the universe.
Of course it does.
It's not. I'm not required to believe. I don't believe in a single being. No, I don't believe in a God, because, like I mentioned earlier, if there was a God that was watching us, nobody really believes that, because
I believe that
function. Okay, you believe that a God is watching you all the time?
Yes.
And watching and listening to your thoughts and all of that type of stuff all the time.
Yes, and I'm gonna tell you why. Because human beings, right now in 2019, are trying to do the same thing. They want to be like God, just like the Bible. Satan told Adam and Eve, "Y'all gonna be like gods." Okay, we got cameras everywhere. As soon as you step outside, you ain't got to step outside no more. Alexa listen to everything you're saying. Your TV looking at you. As soon as you step outside, you're being watched.
So if you believe in these things, okay, it will really affect the population, because under these extreme paranoia that would ultimately, consume one's mind, to not only have your actions scrutinized and judged, but your thoughts as well.
So let me ask you. I know.
So you asked me, did I believe? You asked me, did I believe?
Okay, but this is what I want to say. A lot of stuff you're saying is in Scripture. Just because a person is a Christian, that doesn't mean he can't get diabetes. The Bible said a man that's born of a woman has 2 days of trouble. Everybody going to die. They're going to suffer through pain, heart attacks, deaths, car accidents, everything. But my question to you, let me ask you this. Has there ever been a time in this universe that there was absolutely nothing, like one grain of dust?
I don't know that.
I don't know 30 seconds. Marvin, let's give him a chance to respond.
Know that.
Thank you for your call.
Yeah, I don't know that. No one knows that. You can believe what you want to believe, but no one knows. I'm being genuine about it. I'm not being disingenuous in claiming to know something that I couldn't possibly know, and no one else can know that.
All right, we're flat out of time, Jeremiah. How can folks reach you?
You can reach me at slavesermons@gmail. That's plural, sermons, plural, slavesermons@gmail.com. You can visit me at jeremiahcamara.com and Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, whatever. And I will keep everyone posted when the film comes out. Holy Hierarchy, The Religious Roots of Racism in America.
All right. Thank you, Jeremiah. Folks are out of here. Stay strong. Stay positive. We'll see you tomorrow at 4 o'clock right here on FM 95.9 and AM 1450. WOL, where information is power.